Hey guys, well, welcome back to our uncertainty series. I think I said it last week, so I'll say it again this week. We're living in tough times. Due to everything going on around you right now, you might be feeling a bunch of different things. You might be bored, you might be lonely, disappointed, sad. You might also be discouraged due to the uncertainty of this new reality. There's never been a time in any of our lives when nearly everyone in the world is being affected by just one circumstance. Now, think about this. If you could describe how you're feeling with one word or phrase, what would it be? Just think about that for a moment. The truth is that tough times, they're a part of life, especially right now. But this will eventually pass. And at some point in the future, something else will happen to affect our lives negatively. But the good news is that we always have hope in God. Paul, who wrote, a huge chunk of the New Testament, he had his fair share of tough times. Take a look with me at 2 Corinthians 11:23 through 27. I have worked harder, been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number, and faced death again and again. 5 different times the Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Once I spent a whole night and a day adrift at sea. I've traveled on many long journeys. I've faced danger from rivers and from robbers. I've faced danger from my own people, the Jews, as well as from the Gentiles. I've faced danger in the cities, in the deserts, and on the seas, and I've faced danger from men who claim to be believers, but are not. I've worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I've been hungry and thirsty and often gone without food. I've shivered in the cold without enough clothing to keep me warm. Paul faced some pretty tough times. Think about how you would feel if you were him. Well, let's let Paul tell you in his own words how he dealt with all these things because it's pretty inspiring. Second Corinthians 4:7 through 9. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. We're pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Paul experienced the anxiety and stress of extreme circumstances, but he wasn't defeated. Paul didn't make it sound like things were easy. He felt the pain of what was happening, but he didn't focus on it. Listen again to what he said. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. Paul could face anything because he knew that Jesus was with him and within him. Life's hard, but with Jesus, we're not ever destroyed. We're not in despair. We're not abandoned. Why? See, with Jesus, you always have hope. Hope for now and the future. Sometimes our situations change for the better. Sometimes it stays the same. Sometimes it gets worse. But regardless of the situation, we have Jesus who brings us hope. He will endure whatever we face. Have you ever thought, why is there suffering in the world? So, why did COVID-19 even happen in the first place? Why do good people hurt? The question of suffering is a question that people have been asking since the dawn of time. The book of Job is God's way of saying that these are reasonable questions to ask. The book of Job is about a man who had a really great life and family, and then everything fell apart. If you've never read the story of Job, let me do a quick summary for you. So this takes place in northwest Saudi Arabia. It was called Uz at the time. Job is a spiritual, moral, good living guy who gives God the respect he deserves and does all he can to avoid evil. He's got 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he is just rolling in it. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 1,000 oxen, 500 donkey, and a huge amount of staff and servants. He's the wealthiest man in the area. One day at Job's house, an exhausted worker runs in and tells Job, "The Sabaeans attacked, massacred your staff and servants, took off with all your oxen and donkey. I'm the only one who got away to tell you." Before he finished, another worker runs in and pants, "Lightning struck the sheep and all the shepherds. They're fried to a crisp. I'm the only one who got away to." A third guy runs in. "The Bedouins attacked in 3 groups, killed all the workers, rounded up the camels, and made off with them all. I'm the only one who..." Another guy runs in. "Your children were partying over at the oldest child's house when this whirlwind blew in from the desert. It flattened the house. They're all dead. I'm the only one who got away to tell you." Job stands up. His heart's ripped to pieces, so he does what any dad of the day would do: rips his coat so it looks like his heart feels, torn to shreds. His life's been stripped from him, so he shaves his hair to prove it. He falls flat on his face in front of God and whispers, "I was born with nothing. I'll die with nothing. God gives, God takes back. God is good, and God is good always." In all this carnage, Job doesn't go against God or blame him for what happened, not once. A little bit later on, Job is hit with festering sores. His skin's covered in them, from top of his head to the bottom of his feet. He's in agony, toe curling, gut wrenching, fist clenching, lip biting agony. He's smashing the nearest pots and scraping his skin with the sharp sides just to try and relieve the pain for a split second. His wife comes in and says, "You still trying to hold on to your dignity and all that God stuff? Why don't you go ahead and curse God and die?" Job looks at his wife and says, "You're talking like an idiot. Do we only take the good stuff God offers? Are we only fans of God when it's the good times? Or do we stick it out when the results don't go our way?" In all this mess, Job doesn't say one thing God wouldn't be proud of him for. A little later on, Job's friends come and sit with him to help. But to make a long story short, read the book of Job. They tell him that he must have really made God mad for all this to happen. And through all 42 chapters of this book, Job never loses his faith in God. But he asked God questions. And he had a lot of questions. When you go through tough times, you might have questions for God too. And that's okay. It's perfectly normal. Ask those questions to God. Talk about them with your family and your friends. Here's something to think about. God spoke to Job through the storm. One of the things he said was, "God is good." He was telling Job that he's sovereign. He's bigger than any situation. God is bigger than the coronavirus. He's bigger than quarantine life or any circumstance you face. He's in control. He's on the throne. God is good, which also means that he notices our suffering. Like he answered Job, he'll answer us when we call out to him. Here's another lesson to learn. Although Job was horrified by the situation, he was eventually able to move on. The COVID-19 pandemic will eventually pass. Life will go on one day. Pain and suffering will not last forever. It's easy to think the tough times you face will never end. Eventually it will. Finally, you'll be able to move on. And one final thing to think about. The book of Job ends as God restores Job and gives him way more than he ever had to begin with. And you get the idea that Job knew God in a genuine and profound way. At the end of Job 42, Job ends up defending his friends, God starts a new era with him. He makes Job twice as prosperous as before. His brothers and sisters and all who'd taken off come back and party with him. They sympathize with him for what he'd been through. Each one donates a pile of cash and top of the line jewelry. God makes Job wealthy again. He makes his previous wealth seem like small change. He ends up owning 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 2,000 oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. That's double what he had before. He also has 7 more sons, 3 more daughters. After all this, Job lives to 140. He sees his grandchildren have their children. In good times, he dies old and full of memories. God will often bring good out of difficult circumstances. Your situation, it might not turn out as great as Job's, but look for the good that can come out of a bad situation. There's always something good, a life lesson to learn, or a new opportunity. It's your job to look for it. Thanks for tuning in for Lesson 4. Come back next week for Lesson 5. Check out our other content. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube page. Have a great Wednesday, and I'll see you next week.